All right. Sean Beckner-Carmitchel. It's good to see you, brother. What's going on, man?
Hey, everybody. Hey, Eric. How are you?
It's good to see you, man. Thanks for sticking with me on that technical difficulty. And now I can see the red light, which is what I was looking for before.
There we go. Great.
The beautiful red light that says the spotlight is on all of us. So, man, first off, let me say, what is going on? How's that? I hate to bring it up, but how's the weather in the Midwest? What's going on out there in the Midwest?
Yeah, so we're bracing for a cold front as well as a snow. I recently moved to the Midwest briefly for a couple months to get some pieces done, and it's brutal. It's really brutal. Very cold. Multiple layers of jackets type cold, and it's only going to get colder. So,
I don't want to make
we're at.
I hate to bring up I won't show the window out here where you could see the California weather, which I know you know so well. And just want to say real quick, thank you everybody for watching. I'm gonna for a second close the chat because I get easily distracted, but appreciate you guys very much. What's up, Deb? All right. Yeah, it's warm out here, man.
Flooded.
And remember to follow Sean at Cat with News on all platforms, right?
Yeah, that's my platform on Twitter. I don't really use Twitter much anymore. Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, I think Google Plus, Facebook, I think.
Google Plus.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. My man is a hustler. Google Plus. I love it.
LinkedIn is my normal name, but that's my legal name. But other than that.
Sean, so in the vein of reporting, what are you working on these days? You want to tell us about current, past stories? The floor is yours. What are you working on?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on a few things. Quite a bit of follow-up to pieces I've already written. As far as out here goes, I'm working on a story about environmentalism in Wisconsin, which I wish I could talk about, but we're not quite where we can talk about it yet. I'm working on a piece about some records that I finally got from University of California, Los Angeles, which is about 500 pages of records. A lot of that is communications to and from the former Chancellor Gene Block that were done during the encampment, and just sort of processing all that. Few interesting little tidbits that I can't talk about, but I will say one of the things that's very clear from these email records is it paints a picture of a university that was really deeply divided over the encampment. There's, I would say, about 300 plus emails that are excoriating the authorities over at University of California, Los Angeles, either for their heavy-handed approach to the encampment or for not being heavy-handed enough. And both are really intense. A lot of bad language, a lot of, really furious people, a lot of parents that are concerned for the safety of students, be they, students that just attend the university, students inside the encampment, or, just sort of general concern a little bit. And it also paints a picture of a chancellor who seems to have kind of quit. What's the word? It was 2 years ago. Quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting.
I can't speak for sure. It's possible that for whatever reason they didn't give me all of the email records, but the email records that I have show a pretty silent chancellor, while hundreds of people are asking for some action that was different than the one that they were taking.
Yep.
People. I also, one of the big discussions was whether or not they should cancel classes after the UCLA encampment attacks, as well as after the sweep. A lot of discussions, a lot of pleading for classes to either go remote or even be canceled for a few days. One of the organizations that struck me was there's a student council organization that was asking for the classes to be canceled or put in the future, signed by quite a few of the student organizations, and it made note that they expected even more student organizations, but quite a few of them had people in the hospital, people who were hurt and couldn't sign it because they were, out of commission. They were in the hospital.
Right. Yeah. And for everyone who's just coming in, so what we are, is that my mod has added her SPTV. Are you making a guest appearance? You just added yourself. Mom, let's give it up for SPTV Tattoo Warrior, who I think was just probably logging on to check in on us. But let me go ahead and I'm going to remove you from the thing. There we go. But the best mod out there, she handles, make sure the chat is good and, quiet. Sean's looking at me like, what just happened? Let's talk about UCLA, because unlike a lot of people, myself included, though I was there many, many nights, I was not there the night of, and for those who are tuning in who may not know, what we're talking about is the worst mob attack that I've been able to find on a college campus in American history on the night of April 30th, to May 1st, 2024. But Sean, you were actually there.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit on the idea that it's the largest mob attack, I think.
On a college campus. Sorry to interrupt
on a
you.
College campus, okay. It was one of the largest incidents of political violence since January 6, 2021. Probably not the largest. You probably have to include a few of the mass shootings and things like that. But also, as far as college campuses go, I think you'd have to include Kent State in there. That's a little bit different because that was the National Guard, but they opened fired, killed 4 students, injured quite a few more back in the 60s. Correct. I also think you'd probably want to add at the University of Texas, the shooter who killed a few people on top of the clock tower.
Charles Redmond.
That being said, it was a very, very large, very, very violent event. I knew people who had covered Charlottesville who in the moment were telling me this feels like it has the potential to get there. And it's hard to get an estimate on exactly how many people were hurt because the estimates vary pretty wildly. But I feel confident in saying I personally witnessed at least 10 injuries that to my eye looked like the type that you would go to the hospital for. I've seen estimates as high as 24. I've also seen originally authorities reported 0, which is just clearly not true. They've since kind of hedged that a little bit. And it also, one of the things that I noticed, I went to the encampment quite a few times in the lead up to the encampment attacks. And one of the things that often was said that I think really takes a short view was that what happened was unpredictable or what happened was out of the blue or something like that. I had seen counter protesters at the encampment showing up for days before every day. And the level of violence had a general trend of upwards. I think the Sunday before there was a counter protest organized in part by the ADL, where there was a significant amount of smaller scale violence, folks throwing punches. I actually almost had my phone taken, but was able to kind of yank it back. Really high tensions. And also that was the first time I noticed really a concerted effort by counter protesters to the encampment that seemed to shift away from maybe saying that there's maybe from condemning it from the outside to a little bit more concerted effort to get inside the encampment or to disrupt the encampment or even to, in a couple of cases, commit violence on members of the encampment.
I'm very, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought, and then I'll tell you what I was going to say there.
Yeah. So after that counter protest, which was very large, hundreds of people showed up on both ends. There was a day or two where it was a little bit quieter, but you still saw about a dozen kids, students, for the most part. It's, I haven't been able to identify every single one, start to really ramp up their efforts to, again, get inside the encampment.
Correct.
And
I remember that.
You started to see more and more concerted efforts and more forceful efforts. Eventually, the day before the encampment attack, which I think was this was sort of underreported, I think.
Can I say something real quick too? I just want to jump in here and just say the repeat offenders that I saw as well. I was on the ground for a lot of this. And in an article that I contributed research for that I think Sean bylined on at LCRW News, but in particular, 2 repeat offenders that I'm happy to name because it's on video, Matan Medizada, I believe I said, and I think it was Nori Medizada, who were repeatedly seen antagonizing and amping up the just making it worse there repeatedly. And the reason I'm putting that name out there is because we later found that Matan launched fireworks directly at this encampment, which in my opinion could have killed everybody in there based on what I saw. So sorry to interrupt you. I guess the only word I can use now is upset that justice has not been done here. And I'm glad we're talking about it, but this is an attack that occurred on video. And so please continue what you were saying.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important, and we'll kind of get to that a little bit, how it was a lot of the same people seemed to be sort of leading the charge against those encampments. But, the day before the UCLA encampment attack that got quite a bit of press, I had shown up to the encampment kind of late at night just because I just had, sometimes reporting is doing really intense research and talking to a dozen people and things like that. And sometimes it's just saying, you know what, I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to go look, and I just had this feeling in my gut that day was a good day to show up. And what I found was at first a pretty quiet campus. You had the encampment, but it was getting later. So that was pretty quiet as well. And eventually, I saw a group of maybe 20 people who looked mostly like they were in their 20s, but there were a few people that looked, I would say, as old as in their 50s.
Yeah. Outside agitators is the phrase.
Well, yeah. I mean, a few of them I can definitely verify. Quite a few of them, actually, I can verify. Do not attend UCLA, and a significant portion of them never attended UCLA. Yeah. And there were also, people who weren't college age yet running around. Right. So I saw a group of about 15 to 20 of them sort of running around the campus. At one point, a young woman who was wearing a keffiyeh, excuse me, sort of walking by, and this group of, about a dozen to 20 men yelled first anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab language at her, and then they started yelling, threats of sexual violence. And
terrible.
That is pretty concerning. No one should ever feel unsafe on a college campus, and I think we've done a lot of work in the last 10 years. We haven't done nearly enough work, but I can't imagine a group of, men yelling threats of sexual violence. I can't imagine that that's not an actionable thing as far as campus security goes. So these reports that, the violence came out of nowhere on the attack day seems a little short-sighted and really doesn't look at the fact that, the encampment had really become such an area of crossfire, such an area of deep and intense division, and really started to become a focus of violence. And eventually, I would say about 2 to 3 dozen people the day before had basically launched themselves into the encampment, started banging on barriers, and there was a showdown. And what I think is also really important to mention is UCPD showed up that day and sort of got in between and threatened to arrest basically anyone who walked towards the other side. They had also called, we have records now that come from LAPD that say that University of California, Los Angeles had indeed called LAPD asking for mutual aid that day and then canceled it.
Yeah.
So, flash forward to the next day, I was not there for the initial part of the encampment attacks. I think that there's great footage from William Good. I know Joey Scott was there. Mel Buer was there. And, you saw a pretty clear intent to harm people inside the encampment. Again, throwing large fireworks into a crowd of people is...
Yeah, if I could, sorry, I want to, just for people coming in, to explain, and I want to reemphasize what happened, because the reason I refer to it as the worst mob attack on a college campus, outside of other incidents, is that my feeling is that I think you likely agree that justice has not been done here, and I think that a lot of public. I tell people to watch William Good's stream to understand what happened, but at the same time, that's a very long stream. But what we're talking about, if people are just coming in here, is that around 10:30 on April 30th, large groups of men, many of whom did not go to UCLA or are way out of college age, descended on the campus wearing masks. At least some of them were clearly organized and engaged in some of the worst violence that I've personally ever seen. And I was not even there. I was at home watching William stream. A level of violence. Some of them, Adon On, who was arrested, was wearing, a purge type mask. This event is literally insane, and justice still has not been done for these pro-Palestine protesters, who nobody had the right to do that, whatever you felt. So I just want to interject that. Sorry, go back to
to focus on that mask a little bit. And I wish one day we'll have the budget for an editor who can splice stuff in. But what's interesting about that mask is he actually found it on the ground.
Right.
And it was one of the really more bizarre visual elements of that attack, to have somebody, wearing sort of a blank stare white mask and be hitting students, students and protesters with a large piece of, PVC. I'm not sure exactly who hurt who, but I've talked to a few people who have lingering injuries. One person has a deformity that will probably never go away in their hands. And one of the things that I think also is really, really important to mention is that there was a significant racial component to the attacks. What we saw was at least one black man who was attacked sort of out of nowhere, not really, sort of around the corner from the encampment, pulled by the braids. There was also multiple usages of, I know this is YouTube, so I'll be careful.
No, it's my channel. You can,
multiple uses of let's call it hate language for specifically Black Americans. And we also saw, again,
thank you,
violence directed at women, both physical and with their words. So it's really hard to characterize this as exclusively sort of I'm mad at the encampment sort of action. I don't think that that's fair, particularly given what was said, particularly given I think the viewpoints of quite a few of the attackers, just overall, quite a few of them have ties to alt-right organizations. 2 people that were there were actually have ironically enough neo-Nazi ties, which very difficult to make sense of how a neo-Nazi ended up at a pro-Israel event.
Well,
but
I'll tell you this.
Smarter than me,
and by the way,
probably analyze that a little bit.
I was just going to interject and say, so I actually began receiving, when I started to also investigate this incident, someone reached out to me who basically was like, holds more or less neo-Nazi beliefs, who actually wanted to tell me that he punched someone in the face. He was like he's like, I want you to write about this. And I was like, so after a brief bit of conversation, this person was also clearly like insane, like beyond the normal insane that's involved with reporting. And they started blowing up my phone to the point where I just had to like block that. So it was just one of the so many crazy things happened in that story. That's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements to that. Like I said, the relationship between that group and alt-right groups, I think, is really important to report. The relationship between that group and the later synagogue protests, I think, is important. This is probably way too much time, and we'll gloss over it a little bit. But the relationship between Kahanism and the encampment attacks and the counter protest over at Adas Torah Synagogue, which was also a large-scale violent event, are both really important things that no one's really had a chance to get into. And I think the majority of what we've seen focus on, and I do think that this is probably the most important thing, is it took really almost 4 hours between the first violent event and any significant action by the police.
Yep.
And also, again, the fact that we knew this didn't come out of nowhere. While I was surprised by the level of violence, I was not surprised that it had gotten worse and worse on a daily basis, because there wasn't really any action taken. And my concern is, my concern is, it doesn't. I've recently gotten a bunch of records from UCLA and things like that. My concern is, to me, it doesn't seem like we've really gotten to a point where much has changed. So how do we get there? And now we're seeing, one court case is in litigation, a Title IX focused on essentially Jewish students being exposed to anti-Semitism, which cites the protests. It also cites some classroom events, which to me are a little bit more cut and dry events of anti-Semitism. We're also, I think, likely to see, without revealing too much, we're likely to see, pro-Palestinian or pro-Arab organizations also make a pretty strong classroom Title IX claim. And the universities probably, universities are universities. They don't generally fight these sorts of things to the very end. We could see pretty large scale settlements on both ends.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that they don't care. I'm the one who, as you know, like I'm the one who got the names of the first people who were indicted, which I published on my Substack. And the only reason I got those is because someone tipped me off that people had been quietly indicted. So to me, it's obvious, like this city, these authorities do not care. They don't care. They want this thing to go away. And it's always going to be the reverse, because basically people like you, me, and other people, when you try to hide scandals, it always ends up being worse. You could hide it for a time. I'm just editorializing here, a time, but then it's worse. It's going to come out, and it's going to be so much worse. And so I at this point, I don't think we're going to be a year into this soon that they're going to be honest, but I wish they would, because I promise these people, if they watch this interview, it is going to be worse on your institution if you don't come clean. Like Sean just said, he got 500 pages of records. Like what's in those records? What, you know?
Stay tuned.
Exactly. Stay
I
tuned.
I will say it's pretty clear that the University of California, Los Angeles lost money because of these things. They didn't just spend a lot of money; they lost money. And again, you know, these Title IX lawsuits. It's not my job to say whether or not they will succeed, but they are coming. On top of that, you know, it's so there were 4 indictments. One, it appears, is a pro-Palestinian protester who is being charged with. Forgive me, I don't have my notes on this exactly, but who's essentially being charged with battery of a police officer resisting arrest.
Right.
And then there's 3 indictments. We know for a fact one of them has been arraigned with charge of ADW. Another one it's a little unclear, but I was able to kind of sniff it out a little bit. Has agreed to turn themselves in. However, a date has not been set on when they're going to turn themselves in. They're being charged with unlawful use of tear gas or pepper spray. And one, I have my notions, but we're not quite clear.
Right.
And then on top of that, we also had Eden Own, who was at the time a senior at Beverly Hills High School, who was 18.
A senior in high school. Sorry to interrupt you. Senior in high school engaging in a disturbing violence wearing a white purge-style mask just to...
Yeah. And, you know...
Who was turned in by his mom by accident, almost. Sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean, CNN basically got his mom to admit it, and she later recanted the story.
Yeah.
He was initially charged at the district attorney level, I believe with ADW. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Again,
I think it was ADW, and then they kicked it down to the city attorney, as you know.
And they've kicked it down to the city attorney. The city attorney has not responded to any requests regarding whether or not they will charge him. I think at this point, it's fairly safe to say that the city attorney does not have any plans to do so. Now, I do want to say that there are potential reasons for that. I'm not going to speculate. But just because someone is in charge doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't been, given certain choices and things like that.
The perfect lead into the next thing I want to talk about, but I want to, if you have anything else to say about UCLA, I'd finish it up because I think this is a great lead into my next, what I'd like to talk about.
That's about it.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate the work you're doing on it. I've also worked on it, but and if there is anything you want to talk about, seriously, I just thought that was the perfect. I was thinking about J6 anniversary is tomorrow, and I was just thinking about when we talked about what we saw, what you and I both saw at UCLA, experienced reporters, especially on the ground reporters, who can see the tension building, a lead up to violence. I mean, that's identical to what many people saw right before J6. I would put yourself in that. I'm sure you were feeling that tension too. I'm not putting myself in there.
I more than saw the tension. One of the people that was indicted for their violent actions at January 6th told me about a week beforehand that they were going to storm the Capitol. So
I didn't know that.
I was the opposite of surprised. I was impressed isn't the right word. But I was like, when I first heard sort of that,
follow through.
I was surprised by the level of follow through, I guess would be a good way to describe it. I definitely saw an extremely high rise in frustration coming from the right, coming from a lot of the folks that ended up participating in the January 6th riots. One of the things that has always stuck out to me is there were these protests, rallies, whatever you want to call them, for Donald Trump that were going on weekly at Beverly Hills, specifically in Beverly Gardens Park. There we go. And they had started fairly small. By election time, they were getting into the thousands of people, and they were filled with. It's so hard to describe. Every sort of person that you would imagine going to a Donald Trump rally. Some were just kind of conservatives that wanted to vote for Donald Trump. Some were, deeply Q-pilled types. Proud Boys were seen pretty regularly. One member who is still in federal jail just got sentenced about a month ago, is tied to a white supremacist California gang called the Peckerwoods. Was a regular attendee.
I know who that is.
And I'm going to be careful to not get sued. Just leave it at that. And
au revoir. Best of luck to you and yours.
Yeah,
Please go
well,
ahead,
we'll see. I mean, it's still very unclear what's going to happen to all of the January 6th defendants. I would say that some of the most violent ones, I don't know what's going to happen, but I will say that
I apologize.
They certainly have less of a chance of being released than some of the people who perhaps just sort of walked into the Capitol after.
Is it too late to apologize in advance? I'm just joking.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, fellas. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is, so I always think of this. This is one of those things that, as a reporter, as someone who works kind of on all fronts, I work a little bit video, a little bit photo, and a little bit writing. I remember the tone of the protest that was right before January 6th. I want to say it was like 5 or 6 days beforehand. Completely had changed. Outwardly angry, outwardly aggressive towards press. Even, Fox News got kind of yelled at a little bit. An ABC News van was surrounded until Beverly Hills police came and basically said, knock it off, and let the van, basically they got out, filmed for about 10 seconds and realized that this was not for them.
Can we talk about that for a second?
I don't blame them at all for that. That was, they were surrounded with angry, shouting people.
Yeah.
Sorry, say that again?
Just not to segue, but can we briefly talk about the hostility that's occurred towards press? I do want to stick with January 6th, but I just want to emphasize for people watching and for people who are just coming in. Obviously, Sean and I are both investigative reporters, but that sort of activity became so amped up. There's always been anger and hatred towards press because fascists and people don't like the truth. They don't want the truth to come out. But this kind of stuff, it's now a regular thing. And that I remember when that changed. It was around 2018. I used to go to these I'd cover these conspiracy protests. Sean remembers those. You could walk around. This is my recollection. I just say you could walk around, get conversations, on a human level, talk to people. Their ideas might not be what I agree with. Then there was this shift. So I just want to bring it back to that. There was this shift where he's talking about a news van being surrounded. These people inside are petrified. That it's not new in America, but it is new. It is the regular violence towards press, which Sean and I have both unfortunately experienced in person. So I just wanted to put that out there. Sorry to.
No worries. Yeah, and we should talk a little bit about that because that's something that I think is really important. I slightly disagree with your timeline, but I'm seeing this news van get surrounded. At one point, one photographer was sort of surrounded by the security for the rally, which contained several members of the Threeper movement. And they were, I would say, peacefully but forcefully told to leave and surrounded and sort of walked out. I don't know how I was constantly explaining myself, but I was able to kind of stay on the outskirts, dip in, dip out. I'm very good at doing that, and my thing is I'm there to document what happens. I'm not there to fulfill petty grudges. I'm not there to, as a journalist, my goal is to not affect what's going on. Right. And it's this funny thing where I remember seeing this sign that said, we're not just protesting, we're revolting. And so, I see that. And at first I'm thinking like, oh, like that's a joke about like, the whole like, not being taken seriously. I hadn't thought of the second use of the word revolting, which is like, causing a revolt. So I wanted to talk to them, and immediately I talked to them, and they like shoved the sign in my face. They did not want to be photographed. And I was like, look, man, like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really care who you are. I just want a picture of your sign. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
And, once someone's at that level, I don't believe in taking candid photo, or I don't believe in sort of taking staged photos or anything like that.
Sure,
so, I was like, well, it is what it is.
Right.
And that was also the first time I saw unlawful assembly called on a right-wing protest that wasn't an anti-mask specifically protest. And I remember hearing quite a few people sort of yell, like, we used to back the blue and things like that. So I remember that being a landmark moment and watching that shift, right? Because you used to always hear, like, Blue Lives Matter, back the blue, because the right wing was sort of tangentially in opposition to the Black Lives Matter movement, and in opposition to the anti-fascist movement. So I saw that, and then a few days later, it got absolutely bananas, to say the least. Not just at the Capitol, but in Los Angeles as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of violence, which I think you were there, in downtown LA. And I what I was going to say before too was, so when I said that you likely saw it coming, but I didn't, I just was going to tell the audience that. So at the time, I was not covering this kind of stuff. I unfortunately became I hate to use the word expert, but very quickly I became knowledgeable about this particular arena. But at the time of January 6th, I covered a lot of like money laundering, anti-corruption stuff. I was in a different arena, intelligence. So I was at home, like a lot of people, watching this on TV, like, what, but I know people like Sean were, people who monitored message boards like patriots.win, it was all the lights were blinking red, as they say in national security. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. It was an entry for me as well.
Can I add something to this?
Yep.
Sure. There's a through line here, and there's a through line in history, but we'll focus on the things that I was around for as a journalist. With January 6th, with the Atastora protest, with the UCLA encampment attacks, oftentimes there's this narrative, like, who could have seen it coming, right? And what I found is that, my joke is always, I am not a federal agency with billions of dollars and thousands of employees. I'm an asshole with a camera phone. And if I can figure it out, right? I just reject the idea that nobody in any of these agencies could have seen what was coming.
And I'll give you the answer. I can give you the answer right now. I mean, I know you know this already, but two things I want to too for people who are watching. The Adas protests, which Sean referenced, was actually, I think the Freedom of the Press Foundation said it was the worst amount of violence against journalists since January 6th. And that not to go too much into,
I would believe that.
Yeah, well, I'm almost positive they said that.
Yeah, I would say that there's two events I can think of. I was not at one of them. There's one I would say might apply, which was the Summer of Love protest and counter protest in Portland. Quite a few people with cameras were hit with pepper spray, attacked, or hit with little pepper balls. But I don't think anyone was seriously hurt at that one. And then, I would say that was perhaps comparable. But, one of the things that was different is, and I wasn't there, I was about 10 miles away. The level of one-sided abuse towards the press was pretty striking. And it seemed really deliberate.
Yeah. And exactly. So I just wanted to, Adas Torah it's a long conversation, but basically it was a protest in LA that, disaster doesn't exactly, Sean was there. Disaster doesn't exactly cover it. It's a very long, in fact, I don't want to get too much into that because that's a show on its own. Let's just say it was a disaster it was from start to finish. A lot of people got hurt, and then even the president of the United States weighed in on it. Unfortunately, did not characterize, in my opinion, correctly what happened, but had some kind of January 6th point, which I've now.
As far as auditory goes, I will say this: complicated issue, probably not enough time in a multi-issue show.
We'll do one.
So if anyone here is mad at how it's being characterized, maybe we'll do another show on that.
I would.
But,
I'm.
There's just
very
not
important
enough
event
time to talk about some.
Yeah. And there was something else that I was going to tell you. I forgot.
I'm not sure. But as far as January 6th goes, there's a few things that bear mentioning. Like I said, right. I had been covering the Beverly Hills Freedom rallies for a little while. So a lot of the folks that were involved in the January 6th.
Can you tell people what those are? Just so people know what the rallies were?
Yeah. So they were basically, I think we already did, but we'll rehash it. They were weekly rallies that went on from early summer in 2020 to a few weeks after January 6th was when they seemed to kind of stop. They're back up again. In 2020, it was not uncommon to see thousands of people right in front of the Beverly Hills sign. And like I said, like every type of pro-Trump potential voter that you expect to see in Southern California, from random people who just kind of seem to want to vote for Trump to full-on members of the Proud Boys were there. And I also saw some skull masks, which is always a concern at events like this. And they had kind of started as sort of a extension of the anti-mask protests, which were going on in 2020, and then sort of became their own thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Hope that works.
Yeah. The run up, I remember I was going to say, you talked about not believing that like government agencies didn't know. And the truth is, like, I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of one, I think John Winter, who's a friend of mine, wrote a story about a young analyst, like a 21-year-old analyst at DHS, at Homeland Security, who was begging them, so as someone who's worked in analysis too, and like, not just in journalism, but in analysis, and then I do the same. I've done the same stuff basically, just like for nonprofits investigating extremism. So anyway, it's always the same thing. Many people saw what was coming, but then as it goes up the ladder, there's a long answer there for why it didn't get escalated. I'm going to give the simple answer, which is that the higher up you go on the ladder in these agencies, many people are either sympathetic or are just unconsciously sympathetic. Like they might not be out there protesting, but they're like, they just don't really see it as a problem. And then, of course, you have to remember.
I'll give you my hot take. The thing that hopefully doesn't get me fired from any of my jobs. The three-letter agencies in the United States have a very long history of not taking right-wing threats seriously. They also have a very long history of when that blows up in their face, sometimes literally.
Unfortunately.
Saying, oh, oops, we're going to take this seriously again. And then they do for like 3 months, and then they go back to really not taking these threats seriously. A great example would be, Ruby Ridge was a direct influence on Timothy McVeigh. Both events caused the FBI to go, hey, we should probably do more of that publicly. And then they just didn't. Particularly with the McVeigh investigation. I was not present during the investigation, but I will say a lot of folks that have looked into the investigation that I think are very legitimate reporters, particularly, those that analyze terror threats, very much say they did not do nearly enough investigating on connections within, right-wing spaces, specifically on white nationalist and neo-Nazi spaces. Ruby Ridge led, and Waco led directly to this. It's interesting to see. I don't know if you know this, but you can look at photos of the protests outside of Waco, and you can actually see several people who have been, who 5-10 years later were arrested for essentially either terrorist attempts or actual terrorist attacks.
Straight up, that's something I've learned too as an investigator. Is that your cat?
That is my cat.
The cat's going to make an appearance.
There she is.
What's her name?
Her name is Lilia.
Yeah. Love it. We're going to clip this part.
I want to say hi, but
remember to like, comment, and subscribe to see more of Sean's cats.
Right. That's the cat with news.
I have learned as an investigator, when I wasn't necessarily working as a reporter, but when I, in other capacities, I've learned that a person, in one particular case I can think of, a person who is willing to go out to a government building, even if, and alone, it's difficult to kind of phrase this, but I guess I'm just trying to say, like, I've learned through experience when the red flags are going off, and I always I know who it is just by doing this so many times. I know, bringing it back to what you said, in a photograph, you see that person who's out there, and it's the same person later who could be committing acts of terrorism, and you just through time you learn that, is what I'm trying to say. An unfortunate fact.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things as a reporter that's done a lot of stuff about protests in general, one of the things that's interesting to me is oftentimes I'll go back at footage from years ago, and realize, oh my gosh, like, I have a photo. The photographer in me is like, well, I wish I had known that. I would have gotten some file photo sales there. But you see photos and you realize, I took photos of, there's one guy in particular who was involved in a lot of pro-Trump rallies, who in late summer of 2020 slashed at several black men with a box cutter while yelling a racial slur. He somehow is out. I don't think he got charged. I need to look at that a little bit.
Perfect.
Yeah. And it was outside of what was the bar in Burbank that had the anti-mask policies?
Yeah,
I never got out there. I know it was really hostile, and I just kind of couldn't convince any editors to pick up the story, and I couldn't convince myself to go out there without an editor on board. Tinhorn Flats, that's the name of it.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was before Tinhorn Flats really became a large story, and we don't need to get into that. It was basically a bar that refused to follow the health guidelines of the county, and then the county shut them down, and then a lot of it became sort of a right-wing calling point.
Yeah.
And it's also, my thing is always, when someone says things as a reporter, or in your case, largely as an analyst, listen. Somebody says, "Grr, I'm mad." Okay, well,
right.
As a reporter, it's my duty, regardless of if I agree with them, to go, "Hey, how come you're mad?" Right. Sure. But when someone says something, and I know this is YouTube, so we'll just say concerning, it's also my job to go, I should probably make a note of that and listen.
Sure.
I mean, as a reporter who does a lot of reporting on anti-government groups, I guess would be the YouTube friendly way of saying it, on both ends, I'm pretty reticent to tell authorities anything, because that's just
sure, of course,
not my job. I mean, obviously if someone's got a barrel of things that go boom and driving towards a building, that's probably pretty different. But it's this thing where, people are usually pretty honest about what their beliefs are. And it's kind of my job to listen. I've become more of a general assignment reporter these days. But, I still dip my toes in quite a bit and monitor, Telegram, monitor, even Reddit sometimes. And, when people say things, listen,
Yeah. when I was an analyst, one person who's now serving a couple of years in federal prison for threatening a number of public officials that I'm responsible for that, which it's on my Substack. Actually,
To be clear, you're
SPTV, if you want.
responsible for the arrest, not responsible for the threatening of public officials, right?
Yeah, no.
Make sure you didn't.
I put him away.
All
away. Yeah, put SPTV. If you could put my Substack link in there too, and Sean, we'll put some stuff, your stuff in there later, so people
heck
can.
Yeah.
Sean also has a Substack, but yeah, people want to read my reporting on that, or it was more like my account on that incident. It was not. I just kind of wrote a personal account when I found out he was going away finally. I don't know exactly why I brought that up, just to say that as an analyst, this is actually good advice for anybody and people who are listening, because Sean brought it up. So not on the reporting end, but on the analyst end. What is the difference between somebody? How do you know when to be concerned? Everybody out here is on Facebook or whatever. So I'm going to tell you what it is, because it's what I learned from my first boss when I was in the analyst field, right? I would flag a lot of stuff. Oh, look what this guy said. Oh, look at that picture he posted, right? It's a threat. And she would say, is it specific? Is it credible? And the answer a lot of times, it wasn't specific and wasn't credible. The way when when there's a real problem is, as Sean knows this, or this kind of stuff, but for everybody, it's specific. I'm going to be here at this time, this place, or it's consistent. This is going on for a year or 6 months. You've seen this person posting this kind of stuff. You're starting to see photos of them going out to these places. It's obvious stuff, but in a country where political violence is threatened on a daily basis, that's how you're going to know who to focus on. Is in that case the person, Mike Tomasi, who I wrote, it's on, you can read about it, who in Arizona, who's now in jail. When I saw his account, it wasn't just like, I hate, Biden or whatever. It was like this guy was going out to places more and more, was escalating, and he was straight up. He said, "Give me that DA's phone number. I'll be there tomorrow." That kind of stuff. So anyway, that's
and that's there. I would add one thing to that, and this is the thing that actually is hardest, because it's more. There's nothing I can do about it, but it's concerning. One of the things that always is a red flag to me is when people are publishing, threats, things like that, and then all of a sudden completely stop. Which is, you would think, a good thing, but can also be concerning, right? Yeah. When someone's saying, I'm going to be out here, I'm going to be out here, I'm going to be out here, and then just nothing,
right.
The Travis Bickle type, I guess,
sure,
worries me. And that's the hardest one to deal with. That's the one that keeps me up at night, because it could be that they're changing their ways. It could be that they're, moderating themselves, or it also could be that they're actually doing it. I've seen all three,
Yeah. I was going to actually bring up, so a coworker of mine at a previous job who had been doing on the hate and extremism stuff way longer than almost anybody, like she used to go to like Klan meetings. Like she used to really like.
Still, there are still Klan meetings. They are probably the least of white supremacist and white nationalist sort of generalized sort of section.
Right, but you get the point.
They're probably
understood.
The least, not least worrying. They're, how do I put this? They're the smallest and least growing element.
Right, but to the bigger point, the point I'm trying to make is that when that was a bigger thing, she would go to them in person. She's a very interesting person and a great analyst. The larger point I'm trying to make is she's been doing this work for so long and is older than us, that when we now have this incident where in Vegas, where this person who clearly had far right extremist beliefs, blew up the Cybertruck, and even hinted at there was some neo-Nazi stuff in there about a hard reset, that kind of thing. But the point I'm making is like that issue now, because the guy in New Orleans was a veteran, I think, too, or was in the military. This issue is coming up again about people with military training with extremism. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because my coworker told me one time, she's like, we've been telling them this for 30 years, and they do not care. And I just more and more think that's true.
I want to again push back just a little bit, but also agree with you. The vast majority of veterans in all branches are just people. They
of course.
And I always
that's not what we're saying.
Careful not to stigmatize.
Well, we're not stigmatizing. We're just telling it's a story. I mean,
I want to be I want to be careful to do that before I say what I'm going to say.
Of course.
We need to destigmatize mental health issues. We need to destigmatize specifically people who are in branches of the military, then get out. Many of them feel alone because our country doesn't really do anything for them as soon as they get out, or at least clearly not enough. That being said, it's not unique to the United States, but the United States does have the biggest problem. Canada has also had quite a few issues with their armed forces. There has been, for, I would argue, longer than 30 years, a concerted effort by white nationalist and white supremacist groups to get into the military. And you won't see me give them credit. You won't see me give the United States Army and the United States Marine Corps credit openly very often. But to their credit, they are doing some level of attempt, clearly not enough, to root out, problems within that beat. But what we are definitely still seeing is a large amount of people who have beliefs that, frankly, are dangerous to hold while you are deployed in another country in our name. And you also have, there was, I think, what was it, 2 years ago, 2021, we found, it turns out a bunch of NeoNazis took guns with them when they quit the military. That's probably not great. The attack on our infrastructure on the Eastern Seaboard was done by, someone who, it seems, learned some of their techniques while they were in active duty. I don't know much about the Vegas stuff. I haven't had a chance to read up on it, so I really don't want to comment either way on that.
Sure.
But, this is not a new problem. It's a problem that even the folks that want to do something will, for the most part, acknowledge that it's not a problem that's going to go away overnight. But at the same time, Timothy McVeigh was
another one.
It's pretty clear that there's something attractive about going to other countries and shooting people to white nationalists that is not great. And
I mean, and my counterpoint is, I think, like my coworker said, that I think they don't care because they're not fixing the problem. I don't disagree with anything you said, by the way. I'm just saying I'm pretty frustrated at this point. And, if they cared, they would be doing something. There's simple checks that can be done. If somebody's a neo-Nazi, these people are still getting into the military. I find them all the time. You find them, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're also seeing that within police agencies throughout the country. And frankly, it's not just folks who have bad issues joining the military. It's also folks who have military training, police training, things like that, joining, militia groups. I mean, the Oath Keepers is, I don't have the percentage nearby, but, I would argue more than half of their members have some sort of law enforcement or military training. I know there's also people with like EMT training and stuff like that, but, I mean, even the Boogaloo Boys, I can't give you any number, and they're a small section now, but almost all of the ones I've ever spoken to, have training in ways that you only get from government agencies, be it police or military. So
I have the entire Oath Keepers. I have that leaked list from a couple years ago that went around, and I was, interesting. You're right to read through that. And the best was the people who use their work email or like even their military email. It was like, man, like even though at the time the Oath Keepers weren't quite as well known, it is mind boggling to me that someone would sign up using like .mil or .gov, but you know, I guess
Yeah.
not super, but yeah, they're in there. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also have, you know, the sheriff, Chad Bianco,
yep, that's right.
Riverside County was caught, at least at one time being an active member of the Oath Keepers.
He's on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
you're right.
Particularly given some of his decisions as it relates to immigration and, how they relate to protests, you know, that's, it's I think a lot of people get confused. It's not my job to have opinions, but I think that you can probably draw a through line there, you know, to where there's questions.
Sure. I've always thought that is an amazing story that that's a big job. The sheriff of Riverside County was exposed at one point at being a member of the Oath Keepers, and he's still, not only does he still have the job, he's sometimes being touted as a candidate for governor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, realistically, a candidate that has beliefs like that, I don't think has any real chance of winning the governorship of California without some pretty major black swan events. You know, it's just the reality of the voting demographic in California. But yeah, you never know.
It is it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you also, you know, the relationship between, you know, the constitutional policing sheriffs and, you know, threepers is concerning. You know, there's more than a few sheriffs out there who have concerning beliefs on what a sheriff's job even is. And we're just going to kind of have to see, you know.
Yeah, and if people are wondering, I'll just tell people what a constitutional sheriff is that Sean just mentioned. The short version of what is a constitutional sheriff, what is that movement, is constitutional sheriffs are people who believe that a sheriff, usually a county sheriff, is the highest law in the land, which means that they can tell the FBI what to do, they can tell the president, anybody who tries to enforce the law. It's a far-right extremist movement that it has a particular danger because these people are armed and have a position of power, right? That's what the constitutional sheriff movement is. The biggest, most well-known person is a man named Richard Mack, who I've even seen down here in LA. I think I'm pretty sure during a day of great violence, I think it was August 22nd, 2001, he was, I'm not saying he was participating, but he was a speaker at this event. Remember that medical freedom event? It was during COVID. I'm almost positive he was.
I mean, you know, Los Angeles Police Department identified 5 officers who were. The wording was basically we're in Washington D.C. on January 6, 2021. We still haven't really heard much about that. Honestly, maybe that's a story I need to get ready for next year's anniversary.
Yes, I would very much like this. I'm glad you reminded me.
We really don't know much about what they did or how they were punished, if at all. It doesn't seem as though they were, because generally speaking, LAPD has a thing where they identify how people were punished, but you never know.
Right.
So, yeah, and, you know, and I'll do your job for a second and move things along. You know, tomorrow's the anniversary of January 6th. Too slow for you? And I did want to mention, somebody said that I've been watching too much PPD. I don't know what that is, so I'm going to go ahead and say I haven't been.
Wait, are you looking at a chat?
I looked at the chat for a minute.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that the guests could even actually see the chat. I was not aware of that.
Oh, I have a hack for that.
Yeah, I know what you're doing. Okay, you're doing what I do when I cover protests. I'm looking at, I'm like, what are these guys saying as I'm like filming? I'm looking at the 2 phones.
So you know, we have, looks like 2 rallies in Los Angeles area, both of which have a person who is not just at January 6th, but actually committed acts which landed them in jail as sort of featured speakers. You know more about, I think, the Ed Bedalian case than I do. I probably know more about the DJ Rodriguez case than you do. So do you want to go into the Ed Bedalian stuff?
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to just tell people. I think I think that it's not only just notable from a conversational perspective, what we're talking about here, it's also just notable to know that these things are going on. And as you guys have noticed, sometimes I do editorialize a little because if I'm not on assignment or whatever, I've talked about my different roles. So I look at my role here as different than if I'm on assignment, I'm working. That's one thing. When I was an analyst, that's a different thing. We literally wear different hats, right? So like, yeah. So there's 2 rallies tomorrow.
Oh my
Oh, you okay there?
God. Sorry, that was my cat jumping on the laptop.
Oh, is he? Okay.
You can see
I'm
me
going
all
to
that.
editorialize.
We're okay.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds
All right,
great. No, it looks good.
There's 2 rallies tomorrow. Ahead.
No, it looks good. There's 2 rallies tomorrow, and I'm going to editorialize and say how disgusting I think it is. Just speaking for myself, there's 2 rallies that, to sum them up, tomorrow on the anniversary of one of the worst, most disgraceful events in this nation's history, 2 rallies in LA that are going to celebrate a coup attempt. One is the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally, which is we talked about. That's in Beverly Hills. I already saw that. I'm not trying to plug these things. I'm just telling people this is what's going on. And the other one, there's a likely to be a very small rally across from the federal prison, MDC, which is downtown. And that's also being billed as a flag wave for a supportive Danny Rodriguez, who's serving 13 and a half years in prison for tasing Metropolitan Police Officer Mike Fanone. If you can hear the disgust in my voice that these things are happening, that's because I'm disgusted. I'm really disgusted, and I've started to push this stuff more. When I was just reporting, my voice is, you're supposed to be out of the picture. Unfortunately, my feeling is things are so dire that that's not necessarily possible anymore. So I am going to let my community know what's going on because I'm so sick and disgusted. This is not normal. It's not normal to celebrate a coup attempt. I'm not aware of, he knows more about history than I do. If there's other countries where people have rallies to celebrate coup attempts years later, I don't know what they are.
I mean, technically that's what July 4th is. But
you got me.
Look,
you got me, folks.
What's unique? I don't want to say unique, but
I wouldn't say there was a coup. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Not to get too in the weeds, but I think what's somewhat unique, and I could definitely give some historical examples.
Yes.
We don't have all the time in the world, so I'll list them quick. But what's somewhat unique about what's going on January 6th with right-wing groups is it's pretty rare we see celebrations or commemorations of of unsuccessful attempts like this. Right. The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head was pro-Franco groups after Franco had died. Obviously, all the pro-Francoists, all the fascists were essentially kicked out of office, and they instituted a Republican democracy. A few years after that, there was another attempt by what was left of the pro-Franco faction, and they had become sort of quasi-monarchists in a way. They attempted to storm the parliament and actually succeeded for a couple of hours until the guy that they wanted to put in power, the king, was like, dude, I'm just trying to get the tax money and like hang out in Monaco. Like, I'm not trying to be in charge of a country right now. What do you like? Don't you think you should have asked me first? And he basically told them to go home. And also, they were surrounded by the Spanish military and police force. And it was pretty clear that they had won the battle, but, the war was coming. Yeah. And, occasionally you'll see some sort of ups there. I guess that's the only thing I can really think of off the top of my head, where you had a sort of a failed right-wing governmental coup like that. It's mine, but it is bizarre. I probably shouldn't have said bizarre, but it is. And
it's fine.
One of my big questions is, if this is gonna be how we go from now on. I mean, particularly, Mr. Rodriguez is in jail for quite some time.
Right.
likely. Badalian was let out sort of on a technicality. We'll see what happens with that case. I'm a little bit more skeptical of the belief that Trump is going to release every J6 jail guy. That was smart. Jail guy. Every January 6th detainee, merely because I think even in his circle, there's political will to let out some of the nonviolent actors. I don't know if there's political will to let out, folks like Danny Rodriguez, who, tased a police officer, or, Dempsey, who, essentially curb stomped several officers and, gave several officers concussions and things like that. So we'll see. I don't think it's impossible at all. I will say some people are talking about it like it's an inevitability, and I am over here saying I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that. By the way, in right-wing channels, they're talking about, like, one person was talking about, I have 2 private planes on standby. They think they're going to get out the next day. So that's just straight. I was looking at that last night. They think that
somebody brought up a good point, which is Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes Day was also a failed coup, which is celebrated at this point worldwide.
Interesting.
Of a pro-Catholic terrorist who tried to bomb Parliament. Which, interestingly enough, he really only got as far as he did by complete accident. His plan wasn't really all that sound.
Yeah.
So I guess there's another one for you.
Interesting. I'll have to read more about that. Yeah, I mean, I also think it's possible because Trump is fundamentally transactional. Most of these people can't do anything for him. I don't think so. It might be popular politically, which could be looked at as transactional, but I'm not sure they're going to get. I think it's possible there'll be pardons, but they cannot help him in the same way that I don't know. Somebody can just put money in his pocket, like MBS or somebody like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know I've got a lot of friends who are obviously concerned, that.
There's people in jail that my footage probably helped with that. So I'm,
That's what I was joking before, and I was like, well, hey, I mean, it is what it is. Are they going to get out? I mean, well, the other thing is most of them didn't really get much time anyway. It was only a few who got right. I mean, we'll see.
I mean, it's not my job to say what is a fair sentence, but I will say most of all of the nonviolent offenders got charges that I will say are on the lower end of what they could have been. And the violent offenders, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. You have Dempsey, who got 21 years, which seems kind of low, actually, for, giving
talking about David
police officers concussions.
I just want to say, so people know, he's talking about David Dempsey, who's received one of the longest from out here in Southern California, who got one of the longest, most severe sentences.
So he received the largest sentence of anyone who did not get conspiracy charges.
Interesting. So there it is. And a person who had a long, violent past before this, which is longer conversation.
His criminal record is extremely long. I mean, it looked like
very long.
He unloaded an entire can of bear spray on me at a Beverly Hills Freedom Rally. So exactly bummed to see him out of commission.
Well, just to bring that, like, I wasn't just to bring that up when we talk about seeing things coming. I mean, that's the penultimate example, because that had to be what, 2 years before, 1 year before.
That was about 6 months before. So,
6 months, okay.
So what had happened with
but he was engaged in behavior for a long time.
So with Dempsey, the first really concerning act of political violence that happened was actually a rally in Santa Monica. Where it was at the Santa Monica Pier, and there was a Black Lives Matter rally. I believe that was in 2019. And he unloaded an entire can of bear spray just all over the pier. He hit kids, he hit people that had nothing to do with it. lot of people, and he was actually on probation for the event. And then flash to 2020, he hit one demonstrator in Sunland, Tahunga with a skateboard in the face. That particular demonstrator has a very large scar still from the event. I've seen him he threw punches during a large brawl. There's a long history of political violence there. He was one of the least surprising people to be at January 6th.
Right. That exactly. When we talk about seeing something coming, right? I mean, this was every light was blinking red, and these people were clearly letting people know, and a lack of accountability at every one of those rallies was a slow kind of burn towards, or as Jeff Charlotte calls it, the slow moving coup. I mean, as you saw yourself, every time they got away with something, for lack of a better phrase, it just amped up it just made it worse. Which we could see when many received sentences of like 20 days, and they couldn't believe it. When the cuffs came out, when the FBI showed up, it was like, that wasn't in the realm of possibility. And why would it be when you got away with violence for years? Like why would it be? Some of them are still shocked.
I mean, some of these were people that frankly had committed, crimes on camera that, a police department and a DA likely would have prosecuted had they cared, and would have taken some pieces off of the chessboard, I think. So this sort of thing of ignoring political violence did to some degree, I think, affect January 6th. Happy January 6th, I guess. I don't really know how to. It's going to get your channel demonetized immediately.
No, it's fine. It's like that drill post.
I mean, it's a commemoration, I suppose. I don't really know how to address that, but it's, I'm going to get some glasses tomorrow. So,
well, it's like the drill post. Issuing a correction on my previous post, you actually don't have to hand it to them. That's no, it's a disgusting, tragic day. It's a day of it's a solemn day, and a lot of people got hurt, and we all got hurt. We all got hurt. We didn't have to be there to get hurt. I mean,
well, and
those people, obviously, the people. Let me just clarify: the people who got hurt, obviously, are the priority, like the Sergeant Ganell and the people like that. Who, he's got an op-ed today. Sergeant, I think it's Aquilino Ganell, who Capitol Police, people like that. Harry Dunn, who have my personal, respect isn't even the word. They got, they defended our Capitol. So I just want to say that. But and then on the very bottom of the pyramid is the people who are just shocked at home, like me, but they deserve our respect. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I guess this is sort of a theme of a lot of the reporting that I've done in 2020 and 2021, but I don't know if we've changed a whole lot of the factors that went into January 6th. We still have deeply divided country. We still have a political candidate who seems to be willing to, well, not candidate, now he's president. He will be president, who seems to be close to, right-wing violent groups. There's still very, very little faith in the electoral process. I mean, we even saw Democrats kind of starting to say stop the steal, despite there being no evidence in the 2024 election or 2020 election that there was widespread voter fraud. It seems like we as a country have gotten to a point where whoever loses just says, it was all fake, and that's not to say that it was the same level, but, it was, we have a crisis of legitimacy in this country with our voting process, despite there not really being evidence of voter fraud being at a wide enough level to swing national elections. And I don't know how to fix that. Like I said, I'm just an asshole with a camera phone. That's way above my pay grade. But it reminds me a lot of, in 2022, I talked to a doctor who works the CDC on policy. And I was like, so what happens next? And they were like, well, here's the thing. COVID's going to be endemic. We haven't really changed any of the factors that led to the rise of COVID. So, the next big virus, not much, it's going to go just as fast. We haven't really changed anything. The only difference is now people are even more skeptical of vaccines and masking. So the next big widespread illness is going to be probably pretty bad.
I'm just curious. Do you know what he meant by that? Not to get too off track, but when he said the factors that led to COVID, I mean that's
the factors that led to the spread of COVID. So
people not.
So what he meant by that is not so much COVID itself,
right?
But the socioeconomic factors. The idea that we are very much a society where one person can get on a plane and go to another part of the country, which is good. I'm not criticizing that.
Be there, be wild.
And the way that we handle our food products, the way that we handle our transactions, it's believe it or not, hand washing is still not. Don't look up the number; it'll gross you out.
Isn't that our oncoming defense secretary, Pete Hegseth? Not a hand washer, I recall from a story.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
And it's great. In some ways, really concerning to think, okay, what happens if we have another COVID? Because, we had that month and a half where almost everybody was on board. The next one, I feel like there's also a lot of, I guess, hesitance to do the right thing. If we have to have another lockdown for another illness, the CDC guy basically said, I don't think we can do it. I don't think people will listen. So we'll see. And, the way that we the way that we eat, the way that we particularly meat production and things like that, illnesses can rise pretty quick now.
Yeah. Well, there's the groups in this country have turned, for example, a person who was widely considered is widely considered, except by crazy people, the greatest infectious disease doctor in this country's history, Anthony Fauci, who now needs armed security 24 hours a day. These are things that no one ever know. I think he wrote a book, so I haven't read that book, but just I can't imagine what it would take to get to that point in your life, in your career, and then to have this happen. Talk about you go to medical school. My father's a doctor, I can't imagine going through all that, having all that level of success, and then you find out that this thing happens to your life. Now you'll know you're not even safe anymore. No doctor would ever think. I don't think would ever think something like that would have happened. It's just so crazy. Did you ever think you'd run for your life? And I'm not saying this actually happened, but I'm just paraphrasing. Remember when we were in you were in a Trader Joe's looking for some back entrance because these vaccine people.
Oh my God! I totally forgot about that. That's what I'm completely forgotten about that.
I was trapped in a school board once, and they were. Yeah. It's on Daily Dot. The photo that I took, they were banging on the glass, like it was like pre J6 type stuff. This is a school board meeting. It looked like zombies. You were there for that too.
Well, and I think that. School boards are going to be, I think, they already are, but going forward, that's going to be one of the big battlegrounds of, I hate the word culture war, but for lack of a better term, that seems to be a focus of a lot of right-wing groups. I've been to a few school board meetings and outside a few school board meetings that frankly were, the level of vitriol was, concerning. I would say I've been genuinely in a place as a reporter where I'm in a physical space where I am actually not sure what's going to happen and how I'm going to get out of this. I would say maybe 10 times in my life. 2 of those were school board meetings. Yeah. I think you were also at, was it the Glendale school board meeting?
Yes.
I've never heard so many anti-LGBT slurs in my life. And that includes, like, I'm 38. I was around when, even the idea of gay marriage was deeply unpopular. And I would occasionally go to pro LGBT rallies, and even those received less vitriol and implied violence. It's really a concern.
And thank you for saying. I want to say too, guys. I did see. I think it might have been Style Audit's comment. Showing pictures helps. I 100% agree. So I'll always, as I refine this process, I'll always try to show you guys, because I know you weren't at these events. So sorry if some of this, I know it's hard to see without pictures, these protests, but I definitely hear you on that. I'm a big believer in like visual.
Donate to Eric so we can get an editor, and then you can get all the
we're gonna figure that out. So the point being, there's been some, and I'm going to read a few comments at the end. Also, guys, if you could support the channel, we have some links in there. That's appreciated. Sean is on Substack, Blue Sky. Actually, why don't you give people where they could find your reporting?
So I'm a cat with news on pretty much every outlet. My preferred way to approach me will always be will be Blue Sky in the future. You can find me also on, I'm not calling it X, we're calling it Twitter. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. Excuse me. You can also, I'm going to be starting to use my TikTok channel in a little bit more real way going forward. So any of those, I also regularly report for the Beverly Hills Courier. So you can find me a lot of my reporting there. I regularly report for Left Coast Right Watch. You can find me there. Otherwise, if there's a gnarly protest and I live somewhere near it, usually you can find my work on the TV not too long after. So,
Blue Man. Yeah, I told people your finest hour, which is that's his banner photo, is Blue Man the night the Dodgers won the series. Blue Man only in blue body paint being chased by a group of LAPD officers.
Well, in his defense, he was also wearing underwear.
Okay. Good
So I will say maybe the biggest. Well, I'm viewing it as a compliment I've ever gotten. Was a New York Post called my video they changed the headline, but originally it was that my footage of the man had become a symbol and meme of World Series riots throughout the country, which I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Put that on my CV. The Dodgers won. And what happened was what always happens when the Dodgers win, which is complete and utter mayhem in the streets of Los Angeles, both downtown and in the Echo Park area. So I wasn't sure. It's every year. If they had been at home, I probably would have gone to Echo Park initially. In Echo Park, there was pretty large scale celebrations. They set a city bus on fire. It exploded. Downtown LA has always been sort of one of the spots that anytime a Los Angeles sports team wins, people just end up going out there. So when I went out there, it followed sort of the same narrative that you usually see when a big LA sports team wins a championship, which is it starts out pretty jovial, fun. If there's crimes happening, there's a few, but it's not widespread.
Nobody saw them.
And by the end, you have people selling NO2 in the middle of the street, just balloons everywhere. The F word, and then New York being spray painted on the top of a Brazilian churrascaria. Fireworks being launched into crowds, at the police, into an open window. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but horse-mounted units all over the place. I hate the word clashes, but clashes. And during one of them, a man had covered himself entirely in blue paint and was writing a message of celebration with his body on the street. The police were moving forward, and he ran away. I will say that is one of the most profitable videos I've ever taken in my life. I actually interviewed him a few seconds after he did get away from the police. I heard a lot of people saying like, "Oh, he got arrested." As far as I know, he did not. Though part of that could be chalked up to, who wants to arrest the guy completely covered in paint? Because then you're going to be covered in paint.
Yeah.
So there might have been some reticence to actually arrest him.
Well, it's blue paint. It kind of matches. It's.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to look. I don't want to speak ill of the guy. Dodgers are clearly his favorite sports team, and Lord knows when the Milwaukee Bucks win,
100%.
I've been known to go a little wild. But I interviewed him, and he was very drunk and very happy.
I'm going to read a couple, and we are going to. I'm getting pretty good at StreamYard, but I am going to. I'm going to attempt to definitely throw on more photos and stuff like that. I kind of always enjoy the conversational aspect, but at the same time, if I could load up the blue photo, it'd be great. Okay, so I'll read a couple quick comments here. Adam Carmona said, a lot of people don't see how brittle our democracy is. Well said, Adam. Let's see. Charles Patrick said, veteran here. Sean is right about far-right groups infiltrating the military. Thanks for that comment, Patrick. Charles, excuse me. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Let me read one more. DOA's megaphone. Hey, Eric, thank you for speaking this topic. Respect. Appreciate you. And then last one. Oh, this is a good one here, Sean. Unapologetically Me 26 said, school boards and meetings have become absolutely nuts in the Midwest.
Hey, look at that. If anybody hears about them in the Midwest getting wild, hit me up. I'll be in the Midwest for another month or so.
And if they want to hit you up with tips, how would they do that? Or how would people?
Honestly, Blue Sky is great. You can also email me. I'm going to put it in the chat, and then
sure.
Eric, if you can put it in the actual YouTube chat.
Absolutely.
Also email me at this email address. Wait, sorry. Don't use that one.
Oh, no worries. I'll wait for the second one.
There you go.
In the private chat? Got you. Okay. Proton, right?
So you can email me at seancarmitchel@protonmail.com. If you have any tips, SeanCarmitchel@protonmail.com. It should be mentioned that it is Proton Mail, so it is encrypted. So if you don't want folks snooping into it, there's an extra layer of protection for you.
Yeah, and as you know, to Sean's point, if you need it to be encrypted, you also will need a Proton Mail. So make sure you can also set a timer, and then even Sean won't have access to it after 5 days. So,
yeah. Please make sure if there's a timer, it's at least 2 days. But
yeah, that's like a reporter's thing.
I've heard that's happened to me before, where someone's like giving me a tip, and they're like, "Why didn't you act on that?" And I'm like, "Because I was on vacation for 2 days, man."
That's happened to me where I've set like the timer before, like on Signal or something, and I'm like, oh, and then like a week later, I was like, oh, I just lost the tip because I set the wrong timer on this app. So guys, you can hit me up, Eric LeVay, obviously, elevay@proton.me with tips. Also, things you might want to see in this channel, guests you might want to see. What I want to do is, and I appreciate Sean coming on because
I heard Eric's going to interview my cat next week, guys.
I would. Hey, I can talk to, as you know, I can talk about anything to anybody, including a cat. I want to keep this going. After I interviewed Film the Police LA last week, a lot of people seem to really like that. So I know that we have to keep a schedule, kind of keep this going. So Sean graciously agreed to come on very last minute. You can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, all that. If you want to support the channel, the links are in there. You can also give super chats. Now I feel like a right-wing streamer. When I say the word super chat, I just think of this guy who crashed his car.
Hold on, I got you. You ready for this? I got you. You ready for this?
Oh no, don't right. Do it. Please don't tell me.
Thanks guys for coming to the Eric LeVay podcast. Please smash that like button and subscribe. There we go. How's that?
That was awesome.
Did anybody smash the like button and subscribe?
No, it was great. Brooke said I would love a video breakdown of the UCLA riots. Yeah, we're happy to talk. I have a lot to say about that. And as Sean said, please do smash that like button. I want to thank SPTV Tattoo Warrior, the best mod out there for. Although my chat is good. My chat, we don't get a lot of. Thanks, Brooke. Brooke said sending some love. Thanks for the donation, Brooke. I put everything back into the channel. The more we have, the more we'll be able to do.
And if you guys donate enough, you'll go full Tim Pool.
Yeah, I have a. I actually recently did. Well, yeah. We're gonna. Sean and I are gonna.
I shouldn't talk too much.
No. We're gonna.
Ostensibly, are journalists.
Russia, if you're listening, I need a media job. No,
my Zell is right. You know what? We should talk about the media landscape next time I'm on. I would love to talk about how, that entire shit show didn't entirely happen in a vacuum. I've never said yes to anything that I thought was coming from places that I didn't like it, but it's a tough landscape out there.
Well, I'm actually happy. If there's anything you want to espouse on now, I'm surprisingly not tired. Usually these things take a lot out of me, but I could go a little longer. One more.
My dulcet tones. Well, look. One of the things that's really clear is that all of the current mainstream legacy media operations, including nonprofit journalism, is struggling to make ends meet in a way that's even stronger than at their peak. Newspapers regularly would fold, and now we are fighting over an extremely small piece of the pie. And unfortunately, what that's done is it's made a lot of people who are very good at things like messaging desperate for cash. Not everyone has the same maybe duty to legitimacy that I do. And it's a landscape where people are desperate for money. I can tell you right now, I work harder to make my bone than most. My hours are inconsistent. Some days I might be working 2 hours. Some days I might literally be working until the next day. Unless we can figure out a way to support legitimate, real, investigative journalism, we're going to continue to see it disappear, especially as venture capitalists are circling around these newspapers like vultures, looking to pick up, little bones and things like that. And then when they get bored with their little toy, they disband it. It's what happened with Vice.
No, I saw there were another couple good questions coming in. I am also a good example of that where, I'm not going to say exactly, I remain, it is so hard to make a living in journalism that, it is, analysis and, I'm not going to talk too much about what I do to make ends meet, but I protect people and, that's gratifying to me. And I like it a lot. I use the skills that I learned in journalism to keep people safe. But it would be great also to be able to be, there's only one I can think of as someone who's had more success than most people. I can only think of a few times where I was paid what I would describe as a fair wage, like for what I put into it.
To be fair, I will say, the Beverly Hills Courier has always treated me well.
Nice.
They can always treat me better. But
yes.
Unfortunately, we're at a place where I don't think journalism is going to die. I'm at heart a lot more positive than I think people who know me might think I am. I think that we're going to have to see a pretty major restructuring. I think we're going to, in the next year, I know I have some ideas I'm kicking around. I won't say what they are, but we're going to see a lot more experimentation with the form. We're going to see a lot more experimentation
100%.
with, what is it? How do I turn my work into money, right? And it has an inherent value to society, and unfortunately, in our hyper capitalist society, value to society matters a whole lot less than value to money making operations. So I'm working on that. I think everybody who's a journalist is working on that right now. I did want to say, I saw someone say, do you think social media holds more true than like cable news networks? I have a really complicated answer to that. I think social media is really dangerous. I think that, unfortunately, social media has made it possible for a lie to travel even faster. And social media has done a very good job, or quite a few people on social media have done quite a great job at misrepresenting events. Perhaps cutting something just a few seconds before or after, where there's context that's important. I think that some of the largest social media reporter accounts, and I don't really want to name them, mostly because I don't think it's important to do so. Are at their heart, trading in disinformation, trading in propaganda. So my best advice would be, pay attention to if there are social media reporters, and there are quite a few great ones. I spent years as a social media reporter. Pay attention to who seems to be correct. Pay attention to what people are not saying. Pay attention to, and I know that this is a really hard skill to learn, but if the video is really short and only shows, the moment of violence, be skeptical, see if there's other views, see if there's other viewpoints. Or, by the same token, pay attention to people's language when they are introducing things, so, if an account is, for instance, really trying to propagandize leftist stuff, you'll see, you might see the word pigs in in relation to cops, or you might see, that sort of characterization. That's not to say that the information might not be valid, but, be aware of someone's sort of leaning. Even if you agree with a leaning, I certainly have my politics. Be aware that perhaps someone's reporting exclusively from that side of things. My goal, and look, no one's perfect at this, but is always to kind of represent exactly what happened in a factual way. Not everyone's goal is that. And that's not to say that that's necessarily bad reporting, but just be aware of biases in social media, the same as you would be journalism. And that being said, social media is invaluable to me too. It's just knowing who to trust. Get to know your reporters.
I brought it up to you before, but I'll just say it again. And that was a good question, Brooke. Thanks for asking that one, and thanks, Sean, for answering it. I told you before we started that, we started kind of off what I feel has really kicked off this channel. I know I've been doing it for a little while, but last week we filmed The Police LA. Felt like that was like, all right, like new year, getting this thing going. It was so much fun, great interview. And I'm thinking about that. There was that documentary. It was really good. It was on Netflix. It was about, I think it was about Cambridge Analytica and the 2016, how trying to manipulate people's minds through social media. And I'm bringing it back to that. The day after I interviewed William, which was so much fun, I went out on Hollywood Boulevard, and I'm just like vertical streaming, like just with my phone. And I happened upon a police car stop that I told you, I filmed a little bit of it. The video is unremarkable. I didn't think there was, and I looked at the numbers. So that video got 3 times the amount of views as one of the, like, what I think is one of the best interviews that I've ever had the pleasure to conduct, which was with William. More people wanted to watch chaos than a conversation. And just being honest, like that's the way the human mind works. That's a huge problem. That's a huge
I mean,
problem.
I suppose my one thing that's concerning to me is I don't think it's necessarily the chaos element. I think people are really, I think, drawn, and I don't think this is new. I mean, this is criticisms of when CNN first started. There's a lot of interest, and I think this is human nature, in conflict and showing conflict. You know, I mean, I'm again 38, so one of the first. The first memory I have of like hearing about cable news was the Gulf War. Seeing the little Scud missiles go and that green. You know, and I sort of I think everybody that's about Eric. I think you're about my age. We're all sort of trained to see green and flashing lights and go up. War's on. Especially if you see Wolf Blitzer introducing it. I think this issue with social media is the same. There's responsible reporters on social media. There's irresponsible reporters on social media. I don't think that there's more irresponsible than responsible, or more responsible than irresponsible on social media. But I will say it's easier for irresponsible reporters to travel faster because there's nobody at any point checking, before it's posted. Whereas, I hope so. Salaries are, staff sizes are getting smaller and smaller, but every video news agency has somebody out there whose job it is to go, I don't know. Did you check on this? Right. And by the way, somebody, I think the same person asked if international news is better than national news. In some ways, yes. I will say that of the people that I've sold footage to, I think that this is actually like one of the reasons why I'm like, I often know exactly who to turn to when I'm watching the news. Of the people who I've sold footage to, the people that do the most intense fact checking that I've worked with,
me
would be probably the 3 most intense fact checkers. Would be some combination of Al Jazeera, CNN, and ABC News. By far, all of them asked questions, asked for additional video that they weren't selling to, but just as like a fact check. All of them checked the geolocation on what I gave them and asked for more information. There are other ones, and I won't say who they are, who have not asked pretty critical questions. So. The thing about international news is international news also has certain elements that, you have to keep in mind. So, for instance, I think it's important to know, for instance, that, Al Jazeera and Al Jazeera America are owned by the Qatari government. I think it's important to know Ruptly is owned, was owned partially by the Russian State Department. That's not to say that Al Jazeera doesn't do really great work. They do, and they've done some of the best work, I think, on Gaza. They're, I think, the only international news agency that has reporters still in Gaza. That may have changed recently, but it's taking an extra second, and it's also like I wish that it weren't like this, but understanding, okay, who's good for what. Right.
Yeah. To your point, like there's
Guardian
always
does great work on domestic extremism reporting in the United
100%.
States.
Though I wish they would return my emails. I had sent them a couple of emails, and
hopefully they return mine before yours. But I still want to.
It's always trust but verify. Everybody like the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, right? Like there's. Drop Site News published this article, which I'm a huge fan of OCCRP, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and they had this story that got a lot of. There was a lot of. I don't know if you saw that whole thing, but people were because they got some funding from the government. So I look, the point being, like, First of all, I don't care if OCCRP got funding from the U.S. government. By the way, I would care if it could be shown that, let's say, they look the other way on a story. But
Yeah, well,
I'm not aware.
also,
wait. Let me just finish it. Sorry, I just
yeah.
want to say I'm not aware of that ever happening. I just want to be clear about that. Sorry. Go ahead.
So here's the thing, and this is something that even I have trouble as a journalist sometimes navigating. Sure. Look, there's two types of money sources, right? There's editorial firewall money sources, and then there's non-editorial firewall sources. So some agencies will take a large amount of money, and maybe that the person who has the money says, hey, it sure would be nice if you reported on such and such more. And, that's not good, right? I've also seen donations that were really and truly done purely in the interest of continuing the mission of journalism for an outlet and come with no strings attached, basically just a like, hey, continue to be journalism. Sure. And really, frankly, unless it's, somebody that you're working for yourself, it's really difficult to tell. As far as receiving money from the government goes, my thing is, well, if it's OCPR, if for instance, that 3-letter agency was like, some DA's office or something, I'd probably be a little more concerned. I don't know who specifically gave them money, so I don't want to criticize that.
Sure. Look, when I worked at the nonprofit, it was the same thing. They were constantly getting hammered. Like, let's say, like every nonprofit gets hammered, especially now with the climate as the right moves into power with like, oh, you took money from this, government. It's like, bro, you're going to get money from somewhere. Like it's not. And the place I worked was pretty transparent for the most part. Like it was, people would like screenshot the webpage as it was like some big evidence. It was like, they put it on their webpage. They get funding from what do you want?
Transparency is, I would argue, the more transparent somebody is about their money, the more likely they are to be doing things on the up and up. Probably, not definitely, but
who is going to give money to someone to fight hate and extremism? Like that's like a lot of times it is a government or another nonprofit or whatever. I mean, it's like it's not usually is some wealthy person. Is that better? I mean, what is, like you said, what's important is transparency. Yeah, I mean that's the only way I could say it. They, especially on Twitter now, they try. Remember when the Twitter files was going on? They were like, "Oh, we got you. You took money from the State Department." It was like, okay, well, and like what does that mean? Like a billionaire who buys a social media website is more honest? Like it's a joke.
Yeah. Well, look, money is the root of all evil. And this is one of the challenging things about journalism, and this kind of leads into, in some ways, I would never, ever, ever, ever take money the same way that those folks did, at least not knowingly.
Wait, who? Sorry.
The ones tied into the the Tim Pool and
oh yeah, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about like just nonprofits that got banged on really hard on Twitter for like Medium for doing nothing. Sorry, go ahead. But,
and it's unfortunately money is the root of all evil, and this is one of the reasons why I really try to work for a living, right? But it's tougher and tougher, and I think that we're going to see some. Yeah, I'm already aware of some that I'm not really able to talk about, but we're going to see some different models. We might even see some attempts at returning to the old model. Some smaller publications trying to do a print. I think it's worth a shot.
On that. Actually, this is a point I was remembering before. One of my heroes, Alexei Navalny, rest in peace. A lot of people still don't know that what he, what? You're not a fan?
I mean, I don't know if he's a hero.
I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree there.
Brave, certainly more democratic than his opponent.
Just on that point, just to make the point. A lot of people don't know that what launched him into prominence was video journalism. They think of him more but it was these video investigations And the point being, that's what I think people need. I think a problem in journalism is it's not accessible. The New York Times puts out regularly, some big, great investigation. It's 1,000 pages long, and the average person doesn't read it. Sometimes ProPublica does that too. They also do excellent work. But a video, there's just something about the way the human mind is the way we're geared to absorb information, right? And that's got to be pushed. And this, I want to say too, one of the reasons that I like this format. Remember there was that dialogue going around about, they were like, oh, there needs to be a progressive Joe Rogan, and everyone was joking about it. And I was like, I know this is not your area of, this is like more like on the editorializing thing, but I think that's exactly what's needed, because the far right took over AM radio in the 80s and it was a disaster. I'm not saying we need a disinformation merchant or somebody who's like, not into COVID, but Joe Rogan is very good at what he does. That's why he's, for whether you like him or not. And alternative media like podcasts needs to be explored and needs to be done with people humbly, like people like me or you.
That's what I want to say. I would never be Joe Rogan. I have no interest in being Joe Rogan.
Thank you.
If I'm ever Joe Rogan, please let me know so I can stop being Joe Rogan.
I will let you know.
I
think we need people like that. Go ahead.
I think there are already voices like that. I mean, we have, this is purely on like none of them have quite the reach. And I think that they're all different elements of the political spectrum. But, I mean, there's still a Rachel Maddow, who is, I guess, and this is a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but, Rachel Maddow still has a very large, progressive following. You have, what's his name? Cenk's nephew.
Hassan Piker.
Yeah, you have Hassan Piker.
He's great.
Who has a very large reach.
Cenk is gone off the
people. I feel like people don't know that.
I mean, Cenk. People laugh because I said I'll be the anti. I put it in the comments, but yeah, well, yeah, Cenk. I remember seeing Cenk live. People, when he went on with Charlie Kirk, people don't remember. They don't remember when he was on stage with him in like 2016. I was there when Kirk lost it at Politicon, and you could find it on YouTube. It's like the opposite. Guess they patched things up.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think here's what I'll say. I'm not really much for the culture of celebrity personally. Yeah. I like to keep my head down and do the work. Does that maybe affect my career? Possibly. I don't know. It also probably makes me a lot more hireable. So,
there you go.
I try not to speak too much ill of people, even when when no one's around, I'm throwing popcorn at the TV. But I will say, I think ultimately, as far as sort of the news media goes and things like that, what we're seeing is I think in 2016 there was very much a feeling of the right rejecting the media and crisis of legitimacy, things like that. And even before that, the left is catching up. And part of that may be because I think many of the largest voices on both ends are really commentators who are confused for journalists. Journalism is most of the greatest journalists I know would be incredibly uncomfortable even being on Eric LeVay's YouTube channel, despite the fact that he's a great host and we all love him.
Thank you.
Subscribe.
You think they'd be uncomfortable? Sorry.
Please smash that like button and subscribe. And I think personally, and this is just me, I don't think the left needs another Joe Rogan. I think we just shouldn't have a Joe Rogan on either side. That would be my ideal world, where we just have people who say the thing that happened and who maybe ask two guys about it. This guy said that. the other guy said that. Maybe talk to the authorities. Yeah, what do they say about it? They said this. And then I go, all right, well, is any of this true? And then I go, hey, here's some stuff that says it's true, or here's some stuff that says it isn't true. And then you go back and you go, hey, man, it doesn't seem like that happened. And then they go, this is what actually happened. You're like, all right, thank you for being honest with me. And then you write all that on a piece of paper, and then, you sell that piece of paper. That'd be nice. Yeah,
well, I think
that would be my ideal media landscape. More of that, please.
Well, agree. Both can be true. That's that thing, right? We can both have real journalism, obviously super important, because that's how the truth comes out when there's actual journalism, and we can have, like, let's say, a voice behind a microphone, or pushing a different, like my disagreement is, again, this is a more political thing, but an entire media basically was ceded to the right. I bring up, the reason I bring up AM radio is because that was it's just a disaster that an entire means of communication was ceded, not just to people who are conservative, but Rush Limbaugh influenced people's minds, and there was nothing on the other side. They tried an Air America, which failed. So anyway, I'm just saying,
pretty spectacularly, yeah.
1,000% spectacular, right? It just failed. I mean, they had some talented people, but someone asked a question here that I just want to say. Brooks said, Eric, if it's in your wheelhouse, would you do a connection from media to where the funding comes from? I mean, I think it's worth talking about. Like, I thought the drop site news thing was interesting about OCCRP. I didn't think, like I said, I love OCCRP, but I think it's worth mentioning. The Washington Post is a disaster now, but that, long before that even happened, I thought it was worth mentioning that, a billionaire, obviously our own paper here now, LA Times, is quickly going down the tubes because, again, a billionaire bought it and doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the LA Times is interesting because Patrick Soon-Shiong was actually was looked at as potentially saving the paper. People forget that there had been massive layoffs. The paper was just absolutely shoveling money into a furnace. And that part never really stopped. They've been shoveling money into a furnace since like print ads days. But he, I think, represents this thing where it seems like your venture capitalist types, which I think he bought it. I think originally, I don't know the guy, so I can't say what his motivations were, but it seems as though there was at least partially a real desire to save the paper. Eventually, venture capitalists either run out of money or they get bored. So I think we're starting to see that. I think what's interesting to me is what I'm starting to notice is micro local newspapers seem to be doing all right. Your Beverly Hills Couriers, which has less than 50,000 subscribers, and is a weekly paper. Your Kickapoo Scout, it's a real paper, by the way. Has existed for a long time, and has one editor, one reporter, and takes care of Kickapoo County, in Wisconsin. These sorts of papers seem to be the exception. And I think part of that's because, number one, people, if you can convince people to care about the small area that they live in, that's easier to care about, right? Because, something that affects the residents of, Bongle County in Texas, right?
Yeah.
That's going to affect everybody because, there's only 15 people. Bongle, as far as I know, is not a real county name. If it is, please let me know. And there's also, I can speak to this myself, when I'm working for the smaller papers, it's all freelance, of course. And, you find that people are usually pretty honest with you as long as you're upfront with them on the working end. And B, they have one advantage over everybody else. And it's a really big advantage, which is it doesn't matter how good Google Analytics gets. There is no more targeted ad than a small city newspaper. If I'm looking to advertise exclusive, put in real dollars as an advertiser towards my restaurant that serves split pea soup, right? The money that I put into that hyper local newspaper for an ad, I know for a fact everybody that's reading that, except for maybe a few online, live in the immediate of that split pea soup restaurant. So you can charge a premium. It's a little bit easier to sell ads, especially because face-to-face kind of thing. So they have that advantage. That's one potential thing that I think we're going to see. I think we might see more like large newspapers fold than smaller ones. The really, really tiny ones seem to be doing all right. But that's, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, any last words? Otherwise, let's wrap this up and like
I said, you can follow all my work. I'm at Cat with News on all social handles. Got some big stuff coming up. If you're an editor, hit me up. If you have a tip, hit me up. And thanks for having me on, Eric.
Oh, anytime. And we welcome your come back to LA soon. I hope.
We'll see.
So we're looking forward. We'll see. All right. Appreciate you guys. You could, of course, follow me. I put the Substack link in there. Appreciate you guys. I think that now more than ever, we need voices that are going to be honest and upfront with people and entertaining and all those things. And so appreciate you guys as always. Have a great Sunday and talk soon. Okay. Take care.